This video is brought to you by patreon.com/worsttake. Get access to exclusive live streams and Discord servers, on-screen shoutouts, and early access to some videos when you join now. Help make sure that we can continue to make content like this by supporting the Patreon. Links are in the description down below. What's up, y'all? Got G Bush on the show with me today. We're gonna talk about some Browns. We're gonna keep it focused today. We just gonna talk about work and work things only. By the way, shout out to G because he looked like he actually do work at the barbershop. He got the logo on the polo, he got the logo on the hat. I was like, damn, did you open up a department store? Because you look like the manager. Like, yeah, I know you in charge. Okay.
Yeah, it's funny, like I told you before. We was out there covering Deshaun Watson. He got he opened up a cheese steak little spot, Lefties in Cleveland. It's like it happened to be right down the street from where I'm at. So we went and covered it, me and Earl the Pearl. So we was in there, and a lot of people was like, man, I be seeing you on with Quincy. I be seeing you on UCSS. I see you a lot, man. But I didn't think you was that big. I thought you was like 5'10". Like,
it's always interesting when they let you out in public and people be surprised that you were the size of a Division I football player. like we don't talk about this all the time. Like we spent minutes, hours on these videos specifically talking about how Lawrence Maroney to bust you, and people like, nah, he 5'10". Like, hey, bro, you don't get to the back playing 5'10" and no nose.
Just nothing. Like I'm like, yeah. I did play football, but I guess that's a gift and a curse. Either, people will tell you like, they think you're small or whatever. I'm like, nah, it is what it is, but, at least that means either they acknowledge the fact that they know you more for talking on a microphone than you playing. So they figure you got that status. I don't want to be big my whole life. I am dieting.
Dog, we took a picture next to Myles Garrett, and it was like me and you, and I think Myles was like somewhere near the picture, like in the picture. And I remember being like, we can't post that.
I remember that. He said, nah, bro, Myles,
can't post that.
Y'all cats out there looking like giants,
it's
bro.
2 6'5" people, and it is me, not 6'5". And look, I'm not small.
Right.
But when you put me next to 6'5", 270 and Myles Garrett, I'm going to look like I'm 4 feet tall.
Yeah, okay? it was crazy. Because it was weird. It almost looked like, I remember that picture. He almost photobombed the joint. Like, I think he was walking through. You remember the old school Sasquatch picture where they had that grainy film where they watched Sasquatch going through the woods? That's how Myles Garrett kind of photobombed the joint. But yeah, man. Look, so you look a little larger than you do in real life. It's okay, man. When you see me in public, pull up. I'm a nice person. Well, I enjoy talking.
Hey, it's better than the alternative, G. Because you know what the alternative is? Thought you'd be taller. When somebody walks up on you and they hit you with that, I thought you'd be taller.
Right? Yeah. I thought you was more. I thought you was a little because more look,
everybody thinks you 6'5", and when they watch this video, like people, I've been surprised by the amount of people who thought I was 6'5", like based on how I appear in these videos.
You kind of do look like you would be like at least Sean Merriman's height.
That's crazy.
Like just like it does, man. It's like maybe it's the angle, but you do look like you are at least 6'3". You know what I'm saying?
I just have the kind of confidence that you are used to seeing on somebody 6'3" and above. I take it as a compliment. I don't exude medium t-shirt energy. Yes. But let's kind of talk about these Browns, man. It's been interesting. I've been hearing crazy things being said about Amari Cooper. Like, is it surprising you that they're doing this whole thing again where they're trying to justify arguing that the Browns are going to be a 6-win team? Because it feels like, I'm like, wow, they're really doing it. Because when the Browns went 11-6 last year, I was like, there's no way that they're going to look at this team, say they get healthy and get worse. But you look at what's being put out there, the lines that are being dropped, and it's like, they're about to do this. They're about to tell everybody that we're sick. And honestly, I think this is a good thing because I think this team performs better when they're kind of under the radar, to be honest. And I look at this team, G, and I'm like, so they got Ken Dorsey, who's used to working with quarterbacks like Deshaun Watson. They brought in a lot of new minds on that offensive side. They got new wide receivers. Like, their issue last year was that they couldn't be explosive. So if they find some way to be explosive this year, Nick Chubb comes back, this defense. And then I look at the rest of the AFC North and you see Baltimore, that's a team that's plateauing, right? They're coasting. They can't really do much. They haven't really brought anybody else in. They're clearly not going all in for this year like they were the last few years. I mean, pretty much since Lamar won that first MVP, they've been going all in. This is the first year since that they pumped the brakes a little bit and say, hey, we're going to lose some guys. We lost 3 guys on the offensive line. We lost Pat Queen. We lost a safety. They lost some big pieces to that team, wide receiver wise, like who plays for them right now, I don't know. And
Zay Flowers.
Yeah, Zay Flowers and like Rashad Bateman, I guess, if we were still including him in like a name that we care about. But it's like him, maybe Nelson Aguilar. Do they still have him? Like it's not a great room. So my big question, and you look at the Bengals as well, like, yeah, they're trying to come back, and Joe Burrow's going to be back. And I think they're very underrated compared to what most people say about them. But they're definitely not full swing right now. They're not going to have Tyler Boyd. T. Higgins' status is up in the air. It's funny because the Browns, right, were the team that everybody was like, oh, the reality of the salary cap's going to hit them hard. But we're watching right now, the reality of the salary cap hit Baltimore. We're watching right now the reality of the salary cap hit Cincinnati. What we aren't seeing is that thing that they predicted for the Browns, and we were going to have to cut all these players and lose guys in free agency. That's happening to Baltimore. That's happening to Cincinnati. Cleveland, the team that everybody swore to God it was going to happen once we signed Deshaun Watson, have maintained all their players. Talking about extending Amari Cooper after getting Jerry Jeudy, and now they're in prime position to where the top teams that have been in their way in the AFC North are kind of falling to the wayside a little bit. Not going to be bad teams, still going to be very good, but maybe they're not shooting as hard as they were the last few years. But the Browns still coming out there.
I think the Browns are a product of a couple of things. I think they are a product of the fact that they have a really strong group of individuals that are in the financial department who are very creative in which way they flip money, move money, push money, and renegotiate contracts. So they, we talk about all the time the analytics and those guys. They're giving us the real analytics. They're giving us that real financial. Hey, this is how you really get down with the calculator. So they're great with that. Andrew Berry and the staff doing that. But and also give credit where credit is due. When you look at the Haslams are willing to do what a lot of NFL owners or owners period aren't willing to do. They're not willing to renegotiate and cut brand new money to give to somebody to kick the can down the road. The Browns have done that multiple times in restructuring contracts, giving out more money so that you can have more flexibility now and continue to stack the roster. So for me, that's two things of why the Browns are able to do certain things that other teams haven't, right? Because they figured out the gymnastics that you got to do. And they got an owner that's willing to continue to cut those checks, man. And, I talked about Project Stockpile everywhere I could. And the Browns, I think, did a really good job of backing themselves up, even at, positions where we would not necessarily think the Browns would, especially at the quarterback room and things like that. They brought in more running backs, more wide receivers. But now we're moving on Project Deep Cover. We had Project Stockpile. This is Project Deep Cover. And I'm okay with it at this point of flying completely under the radar. If the national media wants no parts of what we are about, go ahead and project us for 5 or 6 wins, because that just lets us grow what we need to do in silence. Real G's move in silence. So I'm looking forward to guys finding out in real time that the Cleveland Browns ain't about playing. They really. It really came to the forefront when you started talking about Jerry Jeudy and what he's worth and why would you extend him and all that other stuff. And we talked to people time and time again. Listen, It's money. It is what it is. Like, it doesn't prohibit you from going out and getting what you want.
Mm-hmm.
So why would you care about it? So that now, when people went to that, I knew what it was. It's just they're not going to give the Browns the benefit of the doubt, and those people are hell bent on saying Deshaun Watson gonna have to show and prove, and that's what it always comes down to because of just where the trade is and what the roster looks like. But I'm fine with that. Don't believe in it. Don't put you on, but you're gonna get an opportunity to see it first and next year about what this offense and the team is about.
The thing that I find super disingenuous about some of these takes that we're hearing about the Browns right now is this. They're right now, you read these articles, you hear these takes. Their justification for saying the Browns are going to get worse is, but Deshaun Watson, right? Like that's the take. Okay, yeah. Like I know where I'm at. Like I think it's fair to say or have the conversation about if he's a question mark. Like I don't think anybody's going into this being like we know what Deshaun Watson is. That's fair. He is a question mark. But tell me right now, if this team won 11 games, are you going to put that credit on Deshaun Watson? Because where's that credit going to go? Oh, well, they got a great defense. Oh, well, they got a great team. It's like, okay, you can realize that when it's time, when the Browns do win those games, okay, they got a great offense and all that stuff, and they got a great defense. But all of a sudden, when we're talking about it on paper, it's impossible to conceptualize that, hey, even if Deshaun Watson isn't playing lights out football, that this team's probably going to be able to win a lot of games because they had horrible quarterback play last year. I mean, we had 17 touchdowns, 17 interceptions over the whole year, 4 different guys play. Nobody started more than 5 games in a row last year, and they were able to win 11 games off the strength of the defense, right? Like Joe Flacco helped in some areas, PJ Walker helped in some areas, DTR helped in some areas, and Deshaun Watson, when he was out there, I would say the defense had to overcome the least outside of that one game in Pittsburgh, but it wasn't like the defense didn't carry its weight. Like it wasn't like the defense had a stanker and Deshaun Watson was out there winning that game in spite of it. Like the only game that the team survived a true defensive stinker was that game where Myles Garrett decided that he is Cleveland football. Okay, that's my thing. You don't have to be overly praising of Deshaun Watson to think that the Browns are going to have a great record. I am not sitting here like Deshaun's going to get the MVP, anything like that. I think the Browns are going to be good because I think that they just don't require that much from the quarterback position. I don't think that Deshaun needs to win the MVP for the Browns to be a Super Bowl contender simply because he wasn't an MVP last year, and we thought they could win the Super Bowl if he stayed healthy after the Baltimore game.
If he comes out and he plays good Pro Bowl, say 40, we talked about this before. He gives you 4,300 yards, 30-something touchdowns. I think there's half of those individuals that will, that don't want to give the Browns a fair evaluation will dissipate because they're, at that point, there's really nothing you can say. You can say, you look at it, he's a competent player. He's, playing at a Pro Bowl level. And the Browns are winning football games. So, I think for me, there will always be a group of people that just won't like the Browns or Deshaun Watson. Like, and it's baked into the evaluation. It's baked in. It's going to be about 10% people.
Well, it's interesting too because it's not just like exclusively Deshaun Watson. When Baker was here, we had that similar uphill battle with the perception of Baker, and it seemed like that improved like the second he wasn't on the Browns anymore. Like I think that there's like a number of things that goes into it on why people act the way that they do about it.
The Odell Beckham Jr. thing was another thing. There was a lot of people like there was a lot of people that in the national media was like, "Oh, Odell, you don't even need to be in Cleveland. Go somewhere else and we'll like you." But Odell brought that same type of energy too.
Yeah, and it's gonna be interesting to see, because I look at like a team like Houston, and I think, oh, they're doing the thing the Browns did in 2019, and sometimes that works out. Right? Sometimes you throw all these pieces around Lamar Jackson and you go 14-2, right? Like that happened with Lamar once he showed promise in 2018. Sometimes you throw everything around to Baker Mayfield and it falls apart. And I think that's going to be interesting to see there in Houston because that's pretty much it doesn't mean it's going to end the same for Houston. Let me make that clear before people go, oh, you think it's going to happen the same? He's the same. I don't think it's going to end the same way. But all the same elements are there in Houston that were there in Cleveland in 2019. And I know people will be like, well, we don't think the same thing about Baker Mayfield as we do about CJ Stroud. But I think people forget how high people were on Baker Mayfield in 2018, right? Like, this was not, oh, he might be decent, right? Like, people thought he was going to be a transcendent level player. People thought he was the best player in that draft after 2018. Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen were in that draft, right? And people forget how highly we thought of Odell, because like whenever people think of Stephon Diggs now, we thought 2 times of Odell in 2018.
Matter of fact, you brought up Stephon Diggs. What do you, did you like the trade? And what do you think? Do you think it moves the Texans? Do you think it moves the needle on the Texans? Because for me, I can't be a hypocrite. If the Browns got Stephon Diggs, I would be happy too. I'd be like, hey, we got Stephon Diggs. But there is a part of me that says, is he close to some sort of, fall off in terms of production and skill set? What do you think of the move, and where does that put the Texans?
I think it's a good move. I think he's an upgraded wide receiver, and that's going to help them. But I do think the Texans still have some very real problems with the structure of that roster that they haven't really accurately addressed. I do worry about that offensive line. I don't think that the moves that they made to kind of secure that offensive line are very convincing to me. I think once teams really start taking them seriously, that could be an issue that they have. Defensively, I think they have some flaws there, especially on the line of scrimmage. Like, I know they're relying a lot on Will Anderson. They brought in they basically switched out Grenard with Hunter. So like same kind of stuff, same kind of issues there. They run that Joe Woods communication heavy defense, and we know how easily that can go from looking good to looking bad. Just if one person isn't with the program, and they're bringing in a lot of new pieces on that side of the ball. They're bringing in a lot of moving parts. And then offensively, there's this tug and pull that you have. And it's the reason I compare it to Baker Mayfield getting Odell is because you have a wide receiver who's at the top of their game joining a quarterback who's still finding where they are in that game. And that can be a very difficult relationship to manage. Especially look, people give Odell Beckham all the flack in the world for being a diva, being a me guy, but that really wasn't Odell's personality. It's just Odell's presence. He was so famous that it put pressure on everybody, right? Stephon Diggs is not as famous, but he is somebody who's going to put a little bit more pressure on the quarterback directly than Odell Beckham would. And that's where I'm like, ooh, that's not a great combination. Like, that's interesting, because Stephon Diggs, you put him with the older guy, like, I think it works out. But Josh even with somebody around his age, well, not even that, they had to trade him. Right?
That's crazy.
They had to trade him. Like, because Josh Allen wasn't even at the point where he could tell Stephon Diggs, this ain't about you. Right? Like, that is what I mean. It's like, hey, if Josh Allen is having issues getting this dude to play productive football, and he's getting older, what is a second-year player going to do?
He had 100 yards. I never quite got it. I used to always watch, Stephon Diggs and his demeanor. I never really got why he was upset. I mean, he was targeted the most, had over 100 yards. He had over, I believe, 1,200 yards roughly for 5 straight years. He's the number one target. They throw the ball a boatload of times. I used to always just say, why is he, what's wrong, dog? Like, what do you want? 200 balls or what? It's crazy.
Yeah. And I would say the same thing if he got traded here. I think he's a tremendous talent. He can take you over the top, but also I think Deshaun Watson's 28 years old, 29 years old, like significantly older than CJ Stroud. So you would assume this is something that he can deal with, right?
Right.
This is why you feel better about Jerry Jeudy coming to Cleveland, because one, the Browns have a winning environment, despite what people want you to believe outside of Cleveland, and two, Deshaun is a veteran quarterback at this point. Like, he knows what he needs out of Jerry Jeudy. You have Amari Cooper there who could be the template. He don't even got to teach Jerry Jeudy nothing. You just got to watch him. And you have veterans out here. And the thing with Houston is they don't really got veterans like that, right? And even the veterans they have, it's different when you have like the Browns. Here's what I mean by veterans, right? Because I know people are going to look through Houston's roster, tell me I'm hating, point out like somebody who has like 12 years of experience on Houston's roster. What I mean when I say you have veterans isn't you have a player that's been around for a while that joins your team. When I say veterans, I mean like you have a David Njoku who's been on your team for what, 8 years? Is that right?
Yeah. He came in. I think he came in the league. He was one of the youngest players ever. Like I think he was like 20 or something. When he got here.
But David Njoku
he's been here for a minute.
Has been with the Browns for 8 seasons.
Miles Garrett
has been with Kevin Stefanski the whole time, right? Like that's what I mean with veteran. Like, you can get a player that's been around like anywhere. That doesn't mean that you have veterans. Like when I say veterans, you have guys who've been here for a while
and only played under one squad, one team. All they know is the Browns.
Or they just been with the team for a minute. Right? Like they might have played somewhere. Like Wyatt Teller is a veteran for the Cleveland Browns because he played for Buffalo a couple of years, but he's a Cleveland Brown. Like Amari Cooper been here for a little bit, right? Like these dudes have been here for a while. So when you get new guys in, there's an establishment of this how shit goes, right? In that locker room. It's like when you went to OU as a young freshman, there were a bunch of seniors, juniors, red shirt seniors, 6-year seniors that let you know exactly what the rules were going to be, right? Like it wasn't like a bunch of transfers coming in there like, hey man, we making it up as we go along. Like, no. This is what you do with coach. This is how y'all go.
Y'all gonna wheel these TVs in here, and you know what y'all gonna do? Y'all don't ride the elevator. During 2 days, y'all riding, and I'm like, bro, the Peyton Towers is like 12 stories. They're like, yeah, that's the problem. We know exactly where Peyton Towers is. I'll catch you up there. They hitting the button, chilling with the fresh legs. You doing 2 days, and you walking up 8 flights of stairs. That be hurting. Yeah, you know what it is, you know.
But it's like
I got my turn in the sun too.
Yeah, but it's like that is what I mean by veterans on the team. The Texans just started rebuilding that team last year. So they don't really have that infrastructure, and I can't blame them for it. Like, I'm not saying they're doing a bad job because of it, but they don't have that infrastructure there. And this doesn't mean it's impossible, but it does mean it's going to be a lot more difficult to withstand the pressure that these expectations are going to have on that roster. And this is something that I did not understand in 2018, and it's taken me 5 years to cover this team to be like, oh, no. Sometimes you hear people say something and you got some old head stuff, but then you live enough life, you like, okay, they actually knew what they was talking about. This is one of those things where it's like, hey, that team hasn't been around long enough to sustain this kind of pressure.
Or Q, there's not that many teams that have guys who you draft that make it to the second contract. Mm-hmm. That's why it's so important. Guys that get the second contract, that means they drafted you, you played well, team did well, they reinvested in you, you got paid. And now when they bring in other free agents, you are basically the ambassador saying what we about.
And look, I don't put all of it on Baker Mayfield why the team imploded when they tried to go all in 2018, 2019. But the reason that they didn't go well is because who are the leaders of that team, right? It was a Jarvis Landry who just got here. Mm-hmm. It was Myles Garrett who's just figuring out how to be Myles Garrett, right?
Outside, yep.
It was Baker Mayfield who was in his second year and just not ready for that responsibility yet. And things can go wrong. Like that Houston team has a lot of young players in charge. Not just young players. Like that team is led by, from what I understand from the people in Houston, Will Anderson and CJ Stroud. And look, those are going to be great talents, great players, but they're still second and third. Well, they're still second year players, and second year players, I mean, they're just going to have to adjust to this. Now, you could be like the Bengals. The Bengals were a team that kind of put it together just around Joe Burrow. But I think Joe Burrow was older than C.J. Stroud was coming out of college. Like, he did the extra year or whatever. But still, like, yes, that can happen. Also, remember, the Bengals had veterans of the Cincinnati Bengals on that team, right? They're not a team that turns it over much. And that's the thing about the AFC North is these teams have had continuity for like 5 years. And that is why I think these teams are like, they always stand up to the test, because they have veterans on every squad that you've dealt with forever.
If you had to do a top five, with the moves that the Texans made, obviously with the Browns, AFC North, what would you put as your top five teams in the AFC right now?
Kansas City won, obviously.
Okay.
I think Cincinnati is going to be in that conversation. I don't know where they would specifically rank. I think Cleveland can be in that conversation.
That's 3.
Baltimore has to be in that conversation.
4.
And then, am I forgetting anybody else, right? There's nobody else in Kansas City's division. I don't really believe in anybody in the AFC East. AFC South, only team that I think can be in that conversation is Houston, but a lot of moving young pieces there in Houston, so I'm not super concerned about that. AFC West, am I forgetting anybody in the AFC West? Nah.
No, you got the Chargers.
Nah.
The Chargers, Raiders. Who else is out that way?
Yeah, the Raiders just gave like what, $25 million to Gardner Minshew to play quarterback, so I'm good on that.
So that means you is sneaking the Texans in the top.
Yeah, the
5,
Texans can be the Texans and like the Bills. Like one of them two teams gonna make that spot, right? Like either them, the Bills, or the Dolphins.
Yeah, we haven't talked about, but the Dolphins lost a lot, I think, in free agency. I think the Steelers are on that outside looking in. Are you a believer? You not a believer in what the Steelers have done in the offseason?
I think we get so lost in the fact that like, oh, well, they upgraded, that we don't ask. Does it matter if you go from wearing, okay, let's say you out at school and you go from wearing fake ENCY, right, or NC, and then you upgrade to real US polo.
The polo assassin.
Yeah, like. Didn't change anything, dog. Like it's technically better, but you still probably are going to be in the same spot in that social ladder that you were before the fake polo, right? Like
assassin, dang,
yes,
polo assassin.
Yeah.
So you saying, they was frauds when they was fraudulent when they made the playoffs.
They're not fraudulent. But they are who they are. They're a first-round exit team.
Okay.
They'll make the playoffs, or they'll have a chance to make the playoffs. But I don't think Russell Wilson or Justin Fields makes me think that they're a threat to get to the second round.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think they're nice. They're a nice story. They may even have a nice record. You know what I mean? But I do think they're a one and done team.
They're ultimately a first round exit team. They're a wild card only competitor. Like you would be surprised if Pittsburgh beat any of the teams that I mentioned in the playoffs in the first round, right? I think we would all be shocked. So yeah, I think that's where Pittsburgh is, and it's funny because like that's what I think of them. People swear to God, like I think they're gonna go like 4-12 or something like that. Like I'm like, no, they're gonna be a playoff caliber team. They might make the playoffs, but we know what it is once they get to the playoffs. They've been hitting their head on that same ceiling since they lost to Blake Bortles and the Jaguars. Wow. That's where they've been. And like this is where we get lost in that conversation with Mike Tomlin, because we're so focused on talking about, hey, he hasn't gone under 500, and that's important. But I do think part of the conversation is like, okay, well, it's like, what's your beef with JB? What is people's beef with Mark Jackson? Do you feel like you could be better, right, than what you are? Now, I don't think Pittsburgh could be better than what they are right now, than what Mike Tomlin can provide them. I think they are what they are because they're too hesitant to really, they're not aggressive in fixing this quarterback issue. And until they're aggressive about it, they're going to be in the same spot. But I can see how somebody could fool themselves into thinking that they are better than what they are. It's kind of like remember when Bo Pelini was at Nebraska? We getting all over the place with this.
Bro, you got all the analogies today. Bo Pelini and Nebraska.
Remember Bo Pelini was at Nebraska and they were like a 9-4 team or something like that every year.
And they had Taylor Martinez every year. He played back then and continued. He played 16 years before COVID.
I think Adrian Martinez's brothers just made the UFL. But
all the Martinezes.
Yeah. So Nebraska's a perfect example of what I'm talking about, right? With Bo Pelini, they were a 9-win team. And look, they Nebraska. They think they should be national champions, right? So they think they better than winning 9 games every year. So they fired Bo Pelini. And now they are begging to win 9 games at Nebraska, right?
Lucky.
Like, so that's why I think where Pittsburgh's at is like, hey, it might be easy to look at Mike Tomlin. Like, I get why they look at Mike Tomlin and ask themselves, like, is this what's holding them back? I think that's the pitfall that can lead you into being Nebraska, right? Because Nebraska was like, hey, Bo Pelini's holding us back. And look, Bo didn't make it easy. Bo, I was at Youngstown when Bo was at Youngstown. Bo kick it like a jerk. We all know what it is, dog. Like a major league jerk.
He be in his bag. He be in his bag. He don't like... See,
look, Bo kicking like a jerk, but also I've caught Bo at the barbecue joint in Youngstown. You know, I've caught him at Staples. Like, so don't judge the book by its cover, but he kicking like a jerk, man. Like, I've heard the stories from people who played with him. He kicking like a jerk. So I get why it was easy to do that. It's not as easy to do with Mike Tomlin, but I do think you're in a similar spot where you're like, oh, well, we could be better than a 9-10 win team if you're the Pittsburgh Steelers. But if you fire Mike Tomlin, I think you get rid of the last thing that was letting you be a 9-10 win team, because you'll go from a 9-10 win team to a 3-win team. The question is it worth it? Because if you're a 3-win team, you have a better chance to get a quarterback.
You can bottom out.
That's a real question.
That's a very, we figured it out. We've had to go through that before. And I would have nothing would tickle me more than to see the Steelers have to go through that instead of treading water at 7 wins or 8 wins or barely making the playoffs and getting bounced in the first round. I want y'all to experience that wrath. I will say that when talk about the top 5, I do believe the Browns, unlike the rest of those teams, have a different level that they can reach. That's the thing about people talk about Deshaun Watson. Oh, it's all about that. But also on the other flip side is Deshaun Watson has not shown you any of the game that he had in Houston. If that is still in there, then the Browns have the ability to go to another level even higher than some of their peers, because those guys are tapped out. The Browns won 11 games with no quarterback play. What would they be able to do with that defense and having an offense and a quarterback that could elevate people, right? So I think the Browns got a different level they can get to anybody. We know what Joe Burrow gonna do. We know what Lamar Jackson is. We know what Patrick Mahomes is. We don't necessarily know what the Cleveland Browns look like when Deshaun Watson is firing at the top of his game. So, you can look at it half empty. You could look at it half full. But the Browns in that top 5 group of teams have a different plateau that I think they can reach.
Definitely. Well, it's always good to have G. Bush on. Make sure y'all catch us when we do Ultimate Browns on Fridays.
I think we might be back tomorrow. Quincy, was out.
Well, it might not be tomorrow when you see it, but
timing is everything.
You might have already seen it. But we'll see when this video comes out.
The beauty of content, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Well, y'all have a great day. Have a better night. Peace.
Go Browns.